Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Shardcast. I'm your host, Aaron Froats, and today I'll be bringing you coverage of the second Hex Streamers Tournament, brought to you by Hexcasters and our friends over at Hex TCG Pro. Today's matchup will be a North American West Pool Day 1 matchup between Funktion and Hacky. Funktion will be playing a Blood Diamond deck, which will be focusing mainly on using Life Siphon and pushing damage across the board, whereas Hacky will be using a Flying Diamond and Sapphire deck that will center around the card Air Superiority, which will buff all of his flying troops. So without any further delay, we'll go ahead and get right to the matchup. We'll be going to the coin flip. You can see that Hacky's playing Feather Drifting Downriver, and Funktion is playing Crannock. It looks like Hacky drew 0 resources on his opening hand. We will be viewing this match from the point of view of Hacky. Drawing no resources on the opening hand will definitely be a auto mull hand. He'll draw 6 instead. And this time he has 2 Sapphire Shards, so we'll look him to keep this hand, especially with Ancestors Chosen in the opening hand. Funktion will now look at his hand and decide whether or not he's going to mulligan as well. Taking a couple minutes to look over his hand, making sure he's got exactly what he needs. Again, this is Day 1 coverage of the North American West Pool. Funktion does keep his hand, so we'll move on to Hacky, who won the coin flip. Because he won the coin flip, he won't be drawing this step. Instead, he'll immediately play a Sapphire Shard, followed by that Ancestors Chosen card. Ancestors Chosen will allow him at the beginning of his turn to put 2 Ancestral Specters into his deck, which are 2/2 flyers for 1 cost. And after that, he'll pass his turn over to Funktion. Funktion will draw a card in his opening play on turn 1. Looks like he's going to play Shards of Fate, which will allow him to go into his deck and grab a threshold of any one of the basic resources in his deck. He chooses to pull the Blood Threshold, and does not choose to play a card out of his hand, so he remains with 7 cards, and he'll pass it over to Hacky. Ancestor Chosen just twitched there, meaning he's going to put the 2 Ancestral Specters in his deck, and Hacky immediately draws one on turn 2. He chooses to... Looks like he may be playing that one immediately. We'll allow him to draw a card before he decides to play a resource. Yep, he does. Now he has a 2/2 flyer out there. It triggers the draw a card effect, which he draws a Diamond Shard. Let's see if he chooses to play that immediately or chooses to disguise the fact he has Diamond in his deck. He will play that immediately. So now he's showing that he has Sapphire and Diamond in his deck. With 1 resource, though, he has nothing else to play. He's going to go ahead and attack with the Ancestors Chosen and go ahead and get 1 health off of Funktion. Funktion will go down to 19, and the second main phase, Hacky will just turn it back over to Funktion here. Funktion's resources go ahead and replenish, and he will draw a card. He plays a Diamond Shard this time on turn 2 and drops Living Totem, which is a 2/2 troop with 2 cost, and has several different pumping factors. He can give him several different keywords or even pumps +1/+1 on him, all of which cost 3 resources to do. But with the fact that he just played this turn, he's not able to attack with it, and we'll have to pass turn back over to Hacky. Hacky draws a Stone Skin on turn 3, and drops a Sapphire Shard. Stone Skin allows him to interrupt any target action that is targeting a troop or himself. On his attack phase, he attacks with his Ancestral Spectre, which is flying. With that flight ability, Living Totem was unable to block. The Funktion will take 2 damage and go down to 17. Hacky chooses not to play anything while he has only quick actions at this point in time, so he can't play anything with only 3 resources. The Eldritch Dreamer in his hand costs 4. So passing over to Function, his turn 3 shard play is going to be a Blood Shard, which now opens up the possibility for Murder. It's a standard card in any sort of blood deck, which costs 3 and has 2 blood thresholds, so he's met that threshold. Function moves straight on to his attack phase and swings with the Living Totem. With 3 resources back, all of those abilities he can play on the totem are instant abilities or quick action abilities, which means he's going to swing and see if Hacky decides to block with his chosen or not. After Hacky decides not to declare any blockers, see if Function decides to use any of those abilities. He does. Hacky is not able to see which ability is chosen. It doesn't matter at this point in time, though. Hacky's going to take it off the board. Any ability at this point in time is not a good ability to go ahead and tack on there. So he did get Function to use his 3 resources before he burned the card, repelled the card off the board. So in Function's second main phase, he won't be able to play a card because he's out of resources. He remains at 6 cards in hand. And he will pass the third turn back over to Hacky, who now sits a pretty good board state with 2 cards on the board and no blockers in front of him. So he's poised to put in 3 attack in on Function, at least this time. Turn 4, Hacky drops another Sapphire Shard, and that lights up his champion power. The champion power that Hacky has is able to give any creature in his, any troop flight for those 4 charges. He chooses not to give the chosen flight at this point in time because it's not relevant, with no blockers out there, and swings for 3, bringing Function down to 14. Let's see if Hacky chooses to play anything on a second main phase here. He might want to drop that Eldritch Dreamer out there. He does. It looks like he's got socketed a Sapphire Gem in there that whenever he deals damage to the opposing champion, he gets to draw a card. And now, without any more resources, he passes turn over to Function. Function's turn 4. Draws a card. And let's see if he decides to play a shard this turn or not. He does. He plays a Diamond Shard, giving him 2 threshold of each now. That pretty much opens his entire library. And he immediately casts a Persecute, which is a 2-cost blood quick action, which gives target troop -3/-3, which is good enough to take the Dreamer off the board. Don't know if he's worried about any shenanigans on Hacky's part, which is why he decided to use it in his main phase instead of waiting until Hacky's turn, because that is a quick action. He could have used it in Hacky's turn if he decided to. And passes turn back over to Hacky. Hacky now still has that superior board state here, with 2 troops out there and no blockers. Turn 5 doesn't draw a shard, so he can't put another resource out there. Instead, he draws a Menacing Grolk and immediately attacks. Which, unless Function has another Persecute in his hand, that's going to put 3 onto him. Yes, it does. He's down to 11. With Menacing Grolk being a 5-drop, he's going to end up passing turn. Menacing Grolk is a 2/3 troop, which when it enters play, exhausts all opposing troops, and they can't ready on their next upkeep, or prep phase. We'll turn it over to Function. Function draws and plays a Blood Shard. And we'll play Giant Corpse Fly, which is a 2/1 flight creature. But when it comes into play, each opponent must discard a card from their hand. That also, because that was his 4th charge, lights up Function's Champion's charge power, which allows him to draw a card if he uses 4 charges and pays 2 health. So with the Giant Corpse Fly on the stack, Hacky will now have to choose one of his cards in hand in order to discard, and Hacky chooses the Repel. So Hacky's down to 2 cards in hand, which looks to be a Stone Skin and that Menacing Grolk. Function goes ahead and uses that charge power we talked about, which brings him down to 9 health, and draws a card, bringing him back up to 5 cards. Don't know if he's looking for another Persecute, so he could get something else off the board. But instead he passes turn back over to Hacky. We go to turn 6. 2 more Ancestral Specters go into the deck. The Hacky draws a Diamond Shard instead, which gets him to 5 resources, which means that Menacing Grok is available. He goes ahead and plays it. As he enters play, that forces all opposing troops to exhaust, and they will not ready during the next prep phase, which allows both troops to go through unopposed here on Hacky's part, which will put 3 more damage onto Function, drop them down to 6. Function has no answers, so the damage will hit his champion, in which is the Stone Skin in hand. Hacky's going to pass turn back over to Function. Function's prep phase, as you can see, the Corpse Fly will not ready because of the Menacing Grok's power when it enter play. Function does land his 6th turn resource drop, so he's up to 6 resources. With 6 resources, we're more likely to see a Life Siphon coming here soon. And yep, there it is. He goes ahead and exhausts all 6 of his resources and uses Life Siphon, which will gain him 6 health back and deal 6 damage to Hacky. So they're almost even in health now. But that does put Function at a disadvantage of not having any resources back, but it does keep him alive for a couple more turns. Not quite sure why Hacky didn't Stone Skin there. That may have actually put him in a great position to win the game. He could have Stone Skinned the Life Siphon and kept Function from gaining that health. Especially now drawing the Flock of Seagulls. Flock of Seagulls is a 0-1 troop that costs 2 to play with flight and defensive, meaning it can't attack, but all damage that is dealt to it is actually negated, so it can block any number of creatures, including a Crush creature, and not allow any damage to go through. But with only 1 troop on the board for Function, he'd be hard-pressed to put any damage through, so that was a big misplay by Hacky on not playing the Stone Skin. We'll see if he can recover here. Hacky, I think, is trying to decide if he's going to go ahead and play the Flock of Seagulls or hold it in hand. He's doing a little 3-card Monty there to see if he can't change up his luck here, maybe, before he attacks. He does attack with all 3. All 3 do exhaust, putting 5 damage on the stack. Actually, if I do recall, damage does not hit the stack in the Hex TCG. But it does pose a threat of 5 damage, I should say, to Function's champion. And with no resources, Function can't prevent that from happening, and goes back down to 7 health. In Hacky's second main phase, he plays the Flock of Seagulls. So he does have a 0-1 troop out there with flight and defensive. So if Function decides to swing with that Corpse Fly, he won't get any damage through, unless he has an answer for the Flock of Seagulls immediately. Function's 7th turn. Draws a card. And let's see if he hits his 7th resource drop, which would be all 7 this game. It's either a good sign of deck composition or a pretty good luck of the draw there. Knowing the caliber of the field we have here, it's probably a little bit of both. All of these alpha testers in the field do put a lot of time in testing cards, which means they put a lot of time in tweaking their decks, so it wouldn't surprise me to believe that a lot of these decks are well composed as far as the resource distribution goes. As we wait for Function's decision here on his main phase. Knowing he's at 7 health, this is a big decision, facing 5 damage on the board from Hacky. We know Hacky has that one Stone Skin in his hand, so Function, however, does not know that. Function decides to play an Inner Conflict on the Menacing Grok, which doesn't allow it to attack or block. It's looking like Hacky, not sure why he didn't play the Stone Skin there. Maybe he's holding it for another Life Siphon. But that does pose his offensive a little bit of a setback there, because now 2 damage won't go through each turn that may have gone through previously. And he's looking at that card, probably wondering why he didn't play it as well. Hacky draws another diamond shard. All of these Ancestral Specters, which, as we're on turn 8, and he played this Chosen on turn 1, that should be 14, actually 13 Specters in the deck, because he did play one already. 13 Specters out of 60 in his deck now. Almost a quarter of the deck, he can't draw one. He's swinging the Spectre, or the Spectral, I should say. I'm sorry, he's swinging the Chosen. I don't know if he's trying to bait Function in the blocking here, or why he's swinging the Chosen. Not even sure if Function would even block here. Yep, he lets it go through. It goes down to 6 health. I almost wonder why he didn't swing the Spectre, or the Spectral as well, forcing the Corpse Fly to block, which would give him an advantageous board state again. Alas, we go to the next turn, Function on turn 8. Sitting with 5 cards in hand after that draw. So we'll see if he has another Life Siphon here. He plays a Corrupt Harvester, which is a 4-drop 3/3 troop, which can't be blocked except by Artifact troops and Blood troops, as well as have Life Drain. That's going to pose to be a big problem for Hacky, as it doesn't appear he has any Blood troops or Artifact troops thus far in his deck. So that 3 damage is going to go through each time, which also, because of the Life Drain ability, will give Function the 3 health back. That is a huge card to land on the board for Function. Function decides not to swing with the Corpse Fly, which will give him blocker back, and they won't have to sacrifice the Harvester now. And that's a big play for Function. That might actually turn this match around. 2 more Spectrals go in the deck. I wonder if that's called a Spectre. I'm calling it Spectral, but we have to double check on that between matches here. It's Ancestral Spectre. I'm sorry, Ancestral Spectre. My mistake. 2 more go in the deck. Instead, he draws another Diamond Shard. Hacky having some poor luck here with his draws. 15 Specters in the deck. A quarter of the deck now, and he's not drawn another one, which will help his card draw and put more troops out there. Hacky now decided whether he wants to go ahead and swing. He can't block the Harvester, so not quite sure why he's not swinging here. To at least put some pressure on Function. He chose not to play the Shard either. Maybe playing the bluff game, trying to make Function believe he's got something back to play as a quick action. He does have the Stone Skin, but he's had that for a couple turns now. Move on to Function's ninth turn here. Draws a card. First main phase, plays another Blood Shard, giving him 7 resources now. Swinging the 3 in which can't be blocked because Hacky does not have a Blood Troop or an Artifact Troop to block with. He's really wishing he had that Repel that he had discarded earlier to the Corpse Fly. That would have gotten the Harvester off the board. Instead, the Harvester deals 3 damage to Hacky, and Function gains 3 health back due to the Life Drain ability. So we're almost back to even health again. With 4 cards and 7 resources, Hacky has got to be wondering about the Life Siphons in this deck. Because with that 3 damage going on each turn, a Life Siphon all but means the game next turn to Hacky. Yep, there's a Life Siphon right there. Hacky wastes no time here in making sure he Stone Skins this one. He can't afford to let that 7 damage go through and give Function 7 health back. So Hacky's left with 2 shards in hand, and that's it. So without some offensive work here, Hacky's going to be facing 3 damage each turn from the Harvester, and Function will be gaining 3 health each turn. Not a race he wants to play here. As we move to turn 10 of this game 1 of the matchup, 2 more Spectres go in the deck. Total of 17 now. He doesn't draw one. Instead, he draws a Spearcliff Cloud Knight, which is a 3/2, 3-drop, which has Life Drain, Flight, and Steadfast. Could be a game changer. Doesn't get to do anything this turn, though. Hacky decides to swing with the Spectre and the Ancestor's Chosen, posing 3 damage to Function. Function has no resources back, so he can't do anything about the damage. unless he decides to block with the Corpse Fly. Getting 3 of that back after he's facing 3 damage, it's not surprising if he decides to block and pulls ahead in health here. He will, which will bring his life total down to 8. Hacky plays the Cloud Knight on the second main phase. So now Funktion swinging 3 next turn will bring his health total up to 11, Hacky down to 8. Inevitably, with Hacky having no response for that Harvester. Turn 10 for Funktion. Main phase here. 4 cards in hand. Funktion plays another Corpse Fly, which will force Hacky to discard a card here and give Funktion another blocker out there, especially for that Cloud Knight. Hacky, fortunately, only has 2 shards in his hand, nothing else of any value. So he'll just send one of those to his graveyard. And Funktion will more than likely move to his attack phase here. Unless he has a way to get the Cloud Knight or the Cloud Knight or the Flock of Seagulls off the board. He does move to the attack phase. Swings the Harvester. Again, Hacky has no response. Before the damage is dealt, Funktion does play the Persecute, which we saw earlier. This time it's used against the Cloud Knight, which removes it from play. 3 damage to Hacky, 3 health back to Funktion, so they trade life totals here. Funktion to 11, Hacky to 8. And we're going to move to Function's turn here. I'm sorry, back to Hacky's turn. Turn 11. 19 Spectres in the deck. Draws another shard. A really unlucky draw here for Hacky. In almost a move of protest, Hacky does give his chosen flight. And will swing with it. Funktion almost has no need to block it, because it will only take 1 damage away from him. He does choose to let it go through. Hacky with 2 shards in hand has no choice but to turn back to Funktion. And we could almost see an end game here. Funktion would have to be wary of the counter magic if he thinks Hacky's playing it, or another Stone Skin. But you have to think a Life Siphon and the Harvester going through here would end the game. Turn 11, Funktion plays another Blood Shard, giving him 8 resources. With Life Siphon in hand, you gotta think he was going to swing first. He will, which will bring his life total himself up to 13 and bring Hacky down to 5. Meaning he doesn't have to use a Life Siphon for the full resource amount if he doesn't want to pull Hacky away from the game. Just in case that Counter Magic or Stone Skin's waiting in the wings, there's the Life Siphon. He'll choose to play it for 6. It looks like Hacky decides to concede here, so he's going to pass the game back over. While they decide to sideboard here, we'll kind of talk about what went on in that first game, maybe highlight one of the cards. Again, if you're just joining us, we are in between Game 1 and Game 2 of a Day 1 North America West Pool match of the second Streamers Tournament, brought to you by Hexcasters and Hex TCG Pro. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the Menacing Grolk that went out there and was actually interconflicted by Funktion. As we go ahead and pull it up on our screen here, as we take a look at the Menacing Grolk, we'll also go ahead and take a look at Hacky. Go ahead and go through the sideboarding process here. The Menacing Grolk, again, is a 2/3 troop. That when it comes into play, it has flight, but as it comes into play, it will exhaust all opposing troops. And as it exhausts the opposing troops, they're not allowed to ready on the next upkeep or prep phase of that champion. So it can prove to be a very game-changing card if the player who plays the Menacing Grolk has a lot of troops on board. It can deal a damage freely the next turn. Especially if you play it in the first main phase, you can exhaust all of their troops, and now your troops have free reign straight at the champion. Also, that gives you one more turn to do so because as the turn is passed to the opposing champion, those troops will not ready. So they can't block the following turn as well, so it can be a game changer. Unfortunately for Hacky, he really didn't have the troops to deal that much damage. And with the 2 damage each time coming in for the menacing Grolk, Funktion was able to use the inner conflict to make sure its damage didn't go through. So it really didn't do the, or cause the impact that Hacky may have wanted to cause there. So it looks like the players are almost done sideboarding. As we go to the next game here, we'll be going to game 2 of the matchup. We go ahead and make sure they're ready to go. And yes, it looks like they're about ready to go. Sideboarding is going into the tournament director now. And we go ahead and get ready for the coin flip. As soon as they move to coin flip, we'll go ahead and get you back out to that matchup. We are moving to game 2 of the matchup between Funktion and Hacky. And yep, here we go, back to game 2. Coin flip. And let's see who wins the coin flip on this one. Looks like Funktion will win the coin flip. And so he will look at his 7 cards first and decide whether or not he wants to mulligan down to 6. Funktion is up game 1 on this matchup. It is a best of 3 matchup. He decides to keep his hand of 7 and pass it over to Hacky. Hacky looks at his 7 and keeps his as well. So Funktion will open up game 2 with a 1-0 lead in this best of 3 matchup. And opens his turn with a Shard of Fate. As we saw last game, allows him to get in his deck and pull a threshold that he could otherwise pull. Excuse me. And he will pass it over to Hacky. Shards of Fate is really a ideal play on turn 1, as you're not really playing anything on turn 1 most of the time, so it doesn't set you back a turn. So as I said again, he has no resources available because of Shards of Fate. It only gives you the permanent resource. He will pass it over to Hacky. Hacky's first turn, he's going to draw an Ancestor Chosen again. Let's see if he leads out the same way he did last game. Maybe has better results. He does. He plays the Sapphire Shard and then plays the Ancestor Chosen. And again, it can't attack on its first turn unless it has the keyword Speed. So he will be out of resources and pass the turn back over to Funktion. Hacky hoping to get some of those Ancestral Specters out this time that he didn't get last game. If you weren't watching the first game, he was able to get 19 Specters in his deck and was, 20 Specters in his deck, was only able to pull 1, and that was on his second turn. So Funktion responds on turn 2 with a Blood Shard and plays his Living Totem. That again is a 2/2 troop as a 2-drop, and he can pay 3 resources at any time to give it a number of keywords or +1/+1 permanently. Out of resources, he will pass it back over to Hacky. Hacky's got a more favorable hand this turn, and we'll probably see Air Superiority come out. The Chosen shakes as it puts 2 Specters in the deck. Hacky plays a Diamond Shard. And we'll play Air Superiority. That gives any troop he controls that has flight a +1/+1 buff. That is a temporary buff as long as Air Superiority is on the field there. And because Chosen does not have flight, he does not get that buff. However, if we recall, Hacky's champion does give target troop flight for 4 charges. So we'll be looking to maybe see if he uses that ability more efficiently this time around. Funktion turn 3 draws, or sorry, doesn't know. I don't know what he draws. So I'm not looking at his hand, but he plays a Blood Shard, giving him 3 resources, and he will swing 2. This is almost carbon copy to the first game. He this time will give it +1/+1, so he will swing 3. Hacky does not have the repel back this time or the resources to play it, so that 3 damage will go through. Funktion will pass turn now without any resources. Chosen shakes again, putting more Specters in the deck. Hacky draws on turn 3 a sapphire shard. He chooses to play that sapphire shard, giving him 3 resources. He will play a Buccaneer. Buccaneer is a 3-drop 2/2 troop, and when it enters play, you're allowed to return target troop to its owner's hand. That could be yours or your opponent's. Depending on the situation, more often than not, you're going to use the opponent's because it does give it a cost +1 permanently. So that living totem that was a 2-drop now becomes a 3-drop. The Chosen can attack now with no blockers in its path and will deal 1 damage to Function. Hacky will end his turn now. Actually, he's going to take his time ending his turn. He does it in his turn now. Function will see if he'll continue his long-standing streak of resource drops. He only missed 1, I think maybe 2, and that was late in the game last game. Function drops a ruby shard and immediately puts it to good use. We saw he didn't play in ruby shards the first game. The Zentos Inquisitor is gemmed with a ruby gem, meaning it needs to have a ruby shard in play to get the benefit. He immediately, wow, that is a huge, huge drop for Function and a totally unexpected play here. I have to assume with the limited ways to play 3 or more shards that shard was a sideboarded shard and immediately gives the Inquisitor the buff of the gem. We'll probably look at Inquisitor more deeply here shortly, but it's a 3/1 troop, a 3-drop with 2 blood threshold. Normally, it gets the perk of when it dies, instead of going in the graveyard, it will go back to the player's hand with a +2 cost. With that ruby gem in there, when it enters play, it now does damage equal to its attack power to a target random troop. That's why you saw the Chosen get removed from play, because it was dealt 3 damage from the Inquisitor. Now back to Hacky's turn here. It looks like he drew a living totem, played a diamond shard, and now decides to play his Spearcliff Cloud Knight for his turn in his main phase. He gives the Buccaneer flight. Now both troops will get the +1/+1 buff from the air superiority because they both have flight now. Buccaneer thanks to the champion power. So the Buccaneer, since it came out last turn, can attack for 3 damage, and I'm going to assume he's going to. Yep, here he goes. That makes the Spearcliff Cloud Knight a formidable force. As we recall, yep, he shows it to you. It has Life Drain, Flight, and Steadfast. That can buy Hacky some time. Hacky will pass his turn over to Function. Function on turn 5. Let's see if he has any more ruby tricks up his sleeve. He goes ahead and draws a card. Plays a diamond shard, which will give him 4 charges. Yep, and Function will go ahead and use his charge ability from his champion, which will cost him 2 health, but it will draw a card, bringing him to 6 cards here. Hacky goes ahead and notes that as well. And Function plays an Extinction, which will wipe the board. That actually benefits Function, because now the Inquisitor will go back to his hand, and yep, it looks like Hacky does note this. The Inquisitor will go back to his hand, giving him a 5-drop 3/1 troop. That when it enters play, it will deal 3 damage to a target opposing troop. And with Hacky not having any troops on the board, it basically becomes an instant murder spell for any troop in his hand, because the Grok only has 3 defense, the Cloud Knight has 2 defense, and the Totem has 2 defense. So even if they come in flying, my mistake, the Grok would have 4 defense if it comes in flying, so it would not die immediately to the Inquisitor. Hacky trying to figure out which one he wants to put out here. The Grok really doesn't do him any benefit other than the fact that it stays alive, because it doesn't have any opposing troops to exhaust for 2 turns, or turn and a half, depending on which way you look for it. So Hacky trying to decide what's the best play here. He almost knows it's dead when it hits the battlefield. So it's almost at a disadvantage to play it until he gets the Inquisitor. Yep, he's going ahead and play the Totem. And the Cloud Knight. This is interesting play because it targets a random troop. Funktion, if he plays an Inquisitor, can't decide which one he wants to take off the board, and Hacky will only lose one of the troops. So it kind of puts him a little bit ahead in the board state, depending on which one comes off the board. Funktion draws, plays another shard. That puts him up at 6 resources. He's made all 6 resource drops here. And we'll see if Funktion decides to go ahead and play the Inquisitor for 5 cost this time. Again, when it was wiped off the board because of its power that says when it dies it returns to your hand, it also gets a permanent cost of +2. So instead of being a 3 drop, it's now a 5 drop, so that would deplete a lot of Function's resources here. Funktion taking some time to contemplate his approach. He does have 6 cards in hand. Playing Blood, Diamond, and what looks to be Ruby now. We have to maybe think he's got... Here comes the Totem that the Buccaneer bounced off the board earlier. So that now costs 3 instead of 2. But with 3 resources back, Funktion can buff that immediately if he chooses to. It comes in as a 3/3 because as you recall again, and that's a lot of recalling for you who are playing along at home, the ability of the Totem for 3 resources gives a +1/+1 permanently. This is a feature in Hex that is unlike other TCGs. As we see Funktion go ahead and murder the Cloud Knight off the board. The +1/+1 was a permanent buff. Most TCGs, when it's removed from the board, they lose any counters to it. In Hex, if it states the word permanent, which it did in the Living Totem's case, it stays on there. So when it was bounced back to his hand, it comes back in as a 3/3. And as an interesting move, Hacky's turn here, instead of giving the Living Totem a 1/1 buff, he goes ahead and gives it Flight, takes advantage of the air superiority buff, so it's almost like giving it both buffs for just 3 resources. A savvy play there by Hacky. So as it has Flight, it cannot be blocked, and the 3 damage will go through. Funktion goes down to 11 health. Hacky has a Repel in hand now, and 2 resources back, so that is a handy card to have that he can play immediately. Funktion moves to turn 7. Draws a 5th card in hand. Hits another resource drop. Unbelievable. Inquisitor comes out for 5 resources. It does pull the Totem off the board, because it is the only troop. So target random troop becomes the only one out there. Totem can now attack unabated, but... Yep, there it goes. Hacky does play the Repel in response, pulls it off the board. You have to think Funktion has some upper hand board state here with 3 cards in hand, playing a Blood deck. We've seen him play Murders. We've seen him play Life Siphons. We've seen him play Extinctions. We have to assume he's got some advantageous board state, even with the lower health total. But with Hacky's Repel, he's kind of keeping that board state at bay. Gralt comes in, 2/3, exhausts the Inquisitor. It will not ready on Function's next prep phase. Gralt comes in as a 3/4 as it gains the buff from superiority. It's not a 2/3, it's a 3/4 now. So Hacky could put some pressure on Funktion depending on what Funktion has in hand. Funktion draws a 8th card. We see Ozawa the Cosmic Elder. A 0/0 troop with life drain. It gets plus attack and plus defense equal to the amount of your life total. So it will come in as 11/11. The caveat of the card is it doesn't automatically ready during the prep phase. That's something you do have to personally trigger there. It does have life drain, so that could be a menace for Hacky. Again, with Menacing Grok being flying and the Elder does not, the Grok can take health away from Function and lower that attack total for the Elder. So it does equal Function's life total. Hacky draws a Sapphire Shard, swings with the Grok, does take that life away from Function. With no resources back, that will go in unattested. So Function goes down to 8 health. As you saw, the Cosmic Elder goes down to 8 attack and defense in response. You have to think that Repel on hand's going to attack the, going to be used in response to the Elder swinging. Funktion draws, does hit another resource drop for his 8th out of 9 turns. Funktion will swing with the Elder. You have to assume Hacky does. Yep, he does. Play the Repel in response, which wipes that off the board, holding Funktion at bay and somewhat keeping the board state in favor of Hacky. Because with the Flying Troop being on board, Funktion without any removal, which we can not assume at this point in time because we can't see his hand. In other words, without removing the Grok off the board, the Grok will go in uncontested, with the Inquisitor not having flight. And yep, Funktion plays in his second main phase a Corrupt Harvester. That is a 3/3 troop, a 4-drop with 2 threshold that has life drain, but most importantly, as we saw last game, can only be blocked by blood troops or artifact troops, both of which Hacky does not have in play thus far. And we saw him sideboarding a little bit. It didn't look like he had any in his deck, so that Harvester will have a 6 health swing each time it attacks. Hacky can do nothing but apply more pressure on Funktion as he draws another shard. We'll bring Funktion down to 5 health. Funktion is not worried because he will get 3 of that back on the next damage phase with that Harvester. Hacky has no choice but to pass turn here with 2 shards in hand. Funktion does not know that though, so with 5 resources up, 3 diamond threshold, and 2 sapphire threshold, he's seen Stone Skin already. A typical sapphire card is your counter magic, so Funktion does not know he has 2 shards in hand, can be holding a counter spell. Funktion, turn 10, does not play a shard, surprisingly. Swings with all 6. Hacky has no blockers, so 6 damage will go through. 3 health will go back to Funktion, and we're back to 8 to 11, a familiar board state to last game, which Hacky does not like that board state because it did not end in his favor. We'll see if he gets a favorable draw here. Funktion will move to second main phase and play a Spearcliff Cloud Knight of his own. That is very imposing as it gives another life gain troop out there for Funktion. Hacky does not have the aggression out there on the board. He does, however, draw one of his Spectres that he would have liked to seen last game. It comes out as a 3/3 with the immediate buff from Superiority. Triggers the card draws that hit the board. There is the Stone Skin. That will be a counter spell for Hacky. But with the 2 troops out there, I wonder if he will go to attack here, only to keep pressure on Funktion. Because he can't block the Harvester anyway. He can use the Spectre to block the Cloud Knight. It's really a top deck game for Hacky at this point in time. He's going to try to keep as much pressure on Funktion as possible. Funktion in response is going to murder that Grok. Hacky has no choice but to play his Stone Skin in response to keep the Grok's damage going through. However, because this is still an attack phase and not the defense phase, Funktion can still block if he decides to. It would remove the Cloud Knight from the game, but it would not do anything to the Grok. Funktion with 6 health in terms of life drain coming back, yep, does allow that to go through, does not choose to block. So Hacky is at more or less a top deck war here with Funktion. Funktion 1 card in hand, Hacky with 2. We move to Function's 11th turn. Funktion plays Shards of Fate, which gives him another permanent resource, nothing he can use this turn. But it's technically a 9th resource drop on 11th turn. Funktion again hitting over 80% of his resource drops in both games. Excellent card draw and deck composition there. Funktion moves to attack phase without playing anything in his main phase. He chooses to swing all 3 cards. Cloud Knight again has Steadfast, meaning it does not exhaust when it attacks. Hacky has no choice but to block the Cloud Knight. They trade off. The 6 damage goes through from Funktion. 3 health coming back to him from the life drain from the Harvester. So now we're at 11 health for Funktion. Hacky at 5. He needs a top deck here. Again, the The poor luck for Hacky on his card draws, he draws another late game shard, which does not help his board presence at all, and it is looking very, very grim for Hacky. He plays another resource almost out of protest again. And he almost has to hold the Grok back to block the Inquisitor, or else it's nothing but game for him. He can't block the Inquisitor again. I'm sorry, the Harvester, because the Harvester can only be blocked by Blood Troops and Artifact Troops. Funktion hits a 10th resource drop on his 12th turn, uses the Champion Power so he can draw another card. He's more or less looking to end this immediately with a murder spell of the Grok, or maybe even a Life Siphon. He chooses only to attack with the Harvester, which will go through, giving 3 damage to Hacky, returning 3 health to Function, making it 12-2. Second main phase, Living Totem hits the board. Function all but has this game wrapped up. Hacky looking for a huge top deck. Ancestor Chosen, not what he was looking for. All that does is increase his deck. Yep, he goes ahead and wishes Function a good game. That will end the match. Function takes this match 2-0. Hacky goes ahead and plays his resource. Really has no answers for Function's next turn because he can't block the 3/3 Harvester. He goes ahead and concedes, and that will end the match. Well played match by both. It went a late game here, and Function did indeed take it 2-0. Hacky played well, just had some poor luck on the card draw late in the games through turns 9 through 12 in both games. Function had pretty good board state and just really kind of put the pressure on Hacky with the Harvester both games. Hacky had no response for it. His repels were about the only card he could play, and unfortunately with the Corpse Fly in game 1 that removed it from his hand, couldn't really pull it in game 2. The Harvester really just did its work in due time. The interesting play of the sideboard there, Function really surprised, I think, everybody. I know I was surprised, and I know by the way Hacky kept going back and forth to that Inquisitor that he was surprised that Function played a Ruby Shard on the sideboard and was immediately reaping the benefits of it. It was very, very much a huge play. I think that, as we go back and look at the matchup, I think once the Harvester hit the board, I think the aggression by the Inquisitor early on, there was really nothing that Hacky could do but kind of hope to keep Function at bay while he draw a lot of his late game spells there. And I will try to bring up a picture of that card for you, the Inquisitor card. Yeah, here comes the Xenoth Inquisitor, and I'll go ahead and pull it up, and that way you can take a look at it. The Inquisitor there, normally it comes in as a 3/1 troop for a 3-drop, and as it dies, instead of going to the graveyard, it goes back to the player's hand, and it gets a permanent cost of +2. The fact that Function played a Ruby Gem in it that allowed it to do damage equal to its attack power to a random target troop when it entered play, that kind of makes it a 3 damage burn spell, if you will. I know burn is a 2 damage card. A 3 damage spell as it enters play, as often as he has the resources to play it. So a very, very savvy play from Function. I don't want to take anything away from Hacky. He did play a very, very good match. He had a very, very good deck, and his draws at the end of the game there kind of put him at a disadvantage, but it was a very, very, I keep using very, I apologize for the excessive use of very there. It was an interesting match to watch, and I hope that you all found just as interesting as I did. As I go ahead and leave you with a couple of closing comments, I'd like to go ahead and give a shout out again to Hex TCG Pro and Hex Casters for putting on this wonderful tournament. Again, I'm casting the North America West Pool. I hope to bring another game for you on day 2, which will be held on Wednesday, on the Pacific Coast, starting with games at 11 o'clock, 8 o'clock Pacific. I'm on the Eastern Time, so I probably will not have those games out to you to view until Thursday. Until then, I thank you for watching another episode of Shardcast. Please look at the links below this cast. I have placed many links down there, including links to the Twitch pages for both contestants here, as well as links to YouTube pages for the contestants and to Hexcasters. I cannot give enough credit to Hexcasters for putting this tournament together and allowing me the opportunity to bring this to you, as well as the other casts I'll be having later this week. So again, my name is Aaron Froats, known as Froatsylvania, and I appreciate you watching. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.